It was December 24th, 2023, Christmas morning. It was exactly 3:15 a.m. I was on level -9, the deepest, most isolated and coldest point of Vatican City, a geological area that does not exist on tourist maps, and that we, the elite private security team, ironically called the Icebox. The digital thermometer on the concrete wall of the armored corridor read 18 degrees below zero, requiring polar suits, but inside the vacuum-sealed containment cells, the temperature was supposed to be strictly maintained at 200 degrees below zero. It was supposed to be. But on that holy night, while the world above celebrated the birth of Christ, the critical temperature alarm for Cell 7 began to flash in a terrifying silence. There was no shrill siren, just a rotating blue strobe light indicating a catastrophic failure in the liquid nitrogen injection system. I was the only guard authorized by the emergency protocol to go down and check the manual valve before the engineering team arrived. The order was clear and absolute. Never look through the inspection glass. But when I approached the solid titanium door of Cell 7, I felt something physically impossible. I felt heat. A radiant, pulsating and aggressive heat that penetrated through 30 centimeters of ceramic thermal insulation and reinforced metal. The industrial cooling system wasn't broken. It was losing the battle. I brought my face close to the small quartz glass viewport, which was defrosting rapidly, dripping water onto the cold steel floor. What I saw inside was not an ancient manuscript or a holy relic, as I was told upon hiring. It was a man, or something that had the blasphemous shape of a man, sitting naked in the center of the room, immersed in a violent mist of boiling nitrogen. And the detail that almost made my heart stop was not the cold. It was the fact that, at 200 degrees below zero, his skin was red, glowing like an ember, and he was sweating. The Vatican was not preserving that being. They were desperately trying to cool him down so he wouldn't explode and take Rome with him. For you to understand how an ex-military man ends up guarding a thermal monster in the Pope's basement, I need to explain my professional trajectory. I am a former officer of the French Foreign Legion, specialized in operations in extreme environments and chemical warfare. I spent years in scorching deserts and frozen tundras. After my discharge, I worked for private security companies in Switzerland, protecting underground databanks and gold vaults. In August 2023, I was recruited in Zurich by a front company called Custodia, which provides outsourced critical infrastructure passive security services to the Holy See. The salary offered was absurd, triple the international market rate, but the conditions were draconian. Total confinement during 30-day shifts, no cell phone, no internet, no communication with the outside world, and the signing of a confidentiality agreement that stipulated life imprisonment in a private Vatican prison in case of an information leak. My official job title in the contract was Cryogenic Systems Monitor Level 5. The cover story told to us in the briefing was plausible for those who don't ask questions. They said that level -9, excavated in the bedrock below the necropolis, housed the Special Archival Reserve. According to them, stored there were the original manuscripts of the prophets, undisclosed Dead Sea Scrolls, and organic tissues from relics that needed to be kept in absolute cryogenic suspension to avoid biological decomposition. It made sense. The Vatican has incalculable treasures that the world cannot see. My routine was monotonous, cold, and solitary. I spent 12 hours a day in a control room full of monitors, watching pressure and temperature graphs for 12 cells, numbered 1 through 12. Every hour, I did a physical round, through the frozen corridors, wearing a thick thermal parka and insulated boots, checking for leaks in the nitrogen pipes. It was easy work for a soldier tired of war. I looked at the gauges, noted down green numbers, and went back to hot coffee. I believed the lie about the papers until I started noticing the bizarre pattern of gas consumption. The first crack in my reality happened in the first week of December, when winter arrived in Rome. As part of my logistical function, I needed to authorize the exchange of liquid nitrogen supply tanks that arrived in unmarked tanker trucks during the early morning. I started cross-referencing the consumption data on my control tablet out of pure boredom. Cells 1 through 6 and 8 through 12 consumed a stable and predictable average of 500 liters of nitrogen per week to maintain the target temperature of 200 degrees below zero. It was the physical standard calculated to keep a concrete room of that size passively frozen. But Cell 7 was a grotesque and frightening statistical anomaly. The flow reports showed that it consumed 3,000 liters of nitrogen per day. I repeat, per day. That is 60 times more than the other identical cells next to it. Physically, this was impossible unless the room had the door open all the time, or there was an active and powerful heat source inside fighting against the cold 24 hours a day. I tried to rationalize it with physics. I thought it was a serious structural leak, a failure in the wall insulation. On December 10th, during the monthly visit of the maintenance technician, a nervous Italian engineer named Marco, I pointed out the error on the spreadsheet. I said, "Marco, look at this. 7 is drinking gas like it's water in the desert. We have a structural leak." He didn't even look at the clipboard. He went pale, looked nervously at the security cameras on the ceiling, and whispered close to my ear, "It's not a leak. It's a thermal load demand. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Don't ask questions about 7 if you want to receive your Christmas bonus and walk out of here." That genuine fear in his eyes told me everything. There were no old papers in that room. Paper doesn't generate heat. Paper doesn't fight the ice. After that day, the atmosphere underground changed. I felt I was being watched not just by the cameras, but by my superiors in Zurich. Institutional silence in the Vatican is a heavy psychological weapon. No one threatens you directly with guns. They just stop talking to you, creating a social vacuum. The other guards, veterans of other contracts who knew more than I did, avoided the corridor of Cell 7 as if it were radioactive. They did their rounds quickly, heads down, without looking at the titanium door. There was an electric tension in the air, a constant feeling that we were sitting on top of an unstable nuclear reactor about to melt down. I started noticing the arrival of strange teams during the night shift. They weren't archivists, historians, or priests. They were men in silver, mirrored thermal protection suits, similar to those used by volcanologists who collect lava. They would enter the antechamber of Cell 7, carrying lead-lined boxes, and exit hours later, exhausted, dehydrated, and sweating profusely, despite the corridor's ambient temperature of 18 degrees below zero. How does someone come out of an industrial freezer sweating? Once I saw one of them take off his helmet in the hallway to vomit. His face was bright red, skin peeling, as if he had suffered severe sunstroke on a summer day in the Sahara, sunstroke on level -9 of the underground. That defied all logic. The omission from my bosses was clear. Whatever was inside emitted thermal radiation so violent that it required industrial refrigeration just to maintain the building's stability. I started feeling a phantom heat on my skin every time I passed near the door. It wasn't physical, it was instinctive. My soldier's body knew there was a predator there. Christmas Eve brought the final breaking point. The electrical system of the city of Rome suffered a massive fluctuation due to high holiday demand and decorative lighting. The Vatican's emergency diesel generators kicked in immediately, but there was a gap, a technical interval of 10 seconds in the power switch. That was enough. The high-pressure nitrogen injection pumps stopped for a brief moment. The alarm for Cell 7 triggered the blue light frantically. The monitored internal temperature rose from 200 negative to 50 negative in a matter of seconds. This is a rate of heating physically impossible without an active combustion source. It was as if someone had lit a bonfire inside. The control center radio went silent, with no response from supervisors. I was alone in the frozen corridor. The emergency manual, which I had memorized, stated that in case of pump failure, I must manually open the pressure relief valve on the cell door to prevent the tanks from exploding due to gas expansion. I ran over there, my boots pounding on the metal. The titanium door was vibrating and humming. I could hear the metal cracking, expanding, and contracting under thermal stress. I grabbed the emergency valve wheel with my gloves. The metal was hot to the touch through the leather of the glove. In the middle of an ice prison, the door was 40 degrees positive. As I turned the valve with force, fighting the pressure, the ice covering the small armored inspection viewport melted instantly. The water ran down, clearing the quartz glass. And that was when I made the fatal mistake that changed my life. I looked inside. The scene I saw through that 4-inch thick glass defied everything I learned about biology, physics, and thermodynamics. The room wasn't full of shelves with books or boxes. It was a vast empty chamber, with steel walls scorched and darkened by fire. In the center there was a dense, turbulent mist of white gas, liquid nitrogen boiling and evaporating instantly upon touching the floor, creating a cauldron effect. And in the middle of that cloud, there was a figure. It wasn't a normal human. It was a humanoid being, very tall, with a dense and broad bone structure, perhaps 2.5 or 3 meters if standing. He was sitting on the floor in a lotus position, completely naked, in deep meditation. His skin wasn't pale or bluish from the extreme cold. It was an obsidian shade, black as volcanic glass, dark and deep, but traversed by a complex network of veins that glowed and pulsed a burning orange, like lava, flowing beneath newly formed rock. The heat I felt at the door came from him. He was a living biological furnace. The liquid nitrogen was injected by nozzles in the ceiling like an ice storm, and upon touching his skin, it evaporated instantly with an aggressive hiss that I could feel vibrating in the glass. He wasn't frozen. He was just comfortable. The Vatican was spending millions on advanced cryogenics just to keep that being's body temperature at acceptable levels so he wouldn't melt the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica above us. He wasn't a prisoner of the cold. He was a prisoner of his own internal heat. As I watched, paralyzed by primal terror and the fascination of that impossible sight, the creature moved. It wasn't a slow, lethargic movement of hibernation. It was fast, fluid, and predatory. He lifted his head slowly. The eyes. I will never forget the eyes. There were no pupils, irises, or whites. They were pools of liquid gold light, bright, intelligent, and incredibly ancient. He looked directly at me, through the armored glass, through my mental defenses, straight into my soul. In that moment of eye contact, I didn't just feel the physical heat radiating. I felt a wave of crushing mental pressure, a sudden, sharp headache, as if my brain were being compressed. And I understood what he was, not through words, but through instinct. It wasn't an alien from another planet that crashed here. It was something terrestrial, but ancient, predating us. I remembered the legends, the apocryphal texts of Enoch that the Vatican banned from the Bible, about the Watchers, the fallen angels or Nephilim, who were imprisoned in the depths of the earth for their crimes. The Bible says they were chained in eternal darkness, but perhaps darkness was a metaphor for ice. Perhaps they were found in Antarctica, frozen in stasis and brought here secretly. Global warming. What if it isn't just CO2 and pollution? What if it's them waking up? What if there are more, hundreds of them, waking up? That being was generating megawatts of heat just by being awake and meditating. If he got out of there, he would burn all of Rome just by walking down the street. He smiled at me, a subtle smile, of one who knows the ice is temporary and that the eternal summer is coming. The electrical grid backup system activated seconds later with a bang. The main pumps roared, injecting a fresh, violent torrent of liquid nitrogen into the cell, covering the creature again. The view was blocked by the thick white cloud. The viewport froze over again in moments, forming a crust of ice. I was physically thrown back by the tactical containment team that came running down the hallway, armed not with rifles, but with industrial extinguisher hoses and thermal containment nets. I was fired that same morning without explanation. Battle stress and gas hallucination, they said in the forged medical report. They paid out the rest of my contract in full and made me sign legal papers guaranteeing my summary execution if I spoke a word. But I can't sleep. I monitor global temperatures obsessively. Every summer is hotter than the last. Records are broken every year. The Siberian permafrost is melting. The glaciers are retreating. They say it's industry, it's cars, it's us. But I saw what is in Cell 7. I saw the heat a single one of them can generate while standing still. And what if the Vatican isn't the only jailer? What if there are other watchers waking up in underground bases around the world, intentionally turning the planet into a hothouse so they can live comfortably on the surface again? Now I ask you, what would justify keeping a living biological furnace hidden beneath the most sacred and influential church in the world? Is global warming a natural phenomenon, or is it the thermal byproduct of something ancient waking up underground? Leave your theories in the comments. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the heat is rising and we are the only ones noticing the true source. And tell me, how hot is it in your city right now? Comment your city and the temperature. Until the next investigation.